Hello scholars, this is Miss Coleman. We're going to talk a little bit about soil conservation and take some Cornell notes. Woohoo! All right, here we go. So our focus questions, and you're going to write these questions on the left side of your page. Going to spread them out on page 44 in DAB. Why is fertile soil considered a non-renewable resource? How can soil lose its value or fertility? And what are some ways that soil can be conserved? So when you make your Cornell notes, you're going to set them up like this. On the left side, you're going to write these three questions, draw a line, and then on the right side is where you're going to put down the key ideas for each question. Any important information that you find will go on the right side. And at the very bottom is where you're going to summarize your notes in your own words. Now you may want to stop the video here, write down these questions on the left side of your page. All right, so why is fertile soil considered a non-renewable resource, a natural resource? Well, a natural resource is anything in nature that we use. Anything at all in the environment that humans use is considered a natural resource. So that could be plants, that can be animals, that could be minerals. So anything that occurs in nature that we use is a natural resource. A non-renewable resource is that natural resource that cannot be replaced at the same rate that it's being used. So example is fossil fuels. So the oils that we take from the ground take millions of years to be replenished. So we're using them faster than they're being replenished. The minerals that we take from the ground take millions of years to be replenished. So we're using them faster than they're being replenished. So that makes them a non-renewable resource. So how can soil lose its value or fertility? Well, when the same crop is planted in the same soil over and over and over and again, the soil loses or becomes depleted. It loses its minerals. It loses its fertility. For example, in the South, back in the day, cotton was a crop that was planted year after year after year after year, and soon the soil nutrients for cotton were depleted. The cotton crop got smaller and smaller. So Benjamin Banneker was a scientist, and he discovered that planting crops like peanuts, which is a legume, can put nitrogen back into the soil. And that's where the practice of crop rotation came from. So he figured out that if you don't plant the same crops over and over again in the same soil, but you plant something different like legumes or peanuts, that puts certain nutrients back into the soil. So topsoil can be lost where the soil is exposed by poor farming practice and carried away by water and wind in a process called erosion. So the Dust Bowl was caused by drought and poor farming practices in the 1930s. So the Soil Conservation Act of 1935 forced farmers to change those farming practices. And you can see from this picture of Goodwell, Oklahoma in the 1930s, out in the Great Plains, there just weren't many trees. And when they went in and plowed up acres and acres of soil and left all the topsoil exposed, the wind came blowing through, took the topsoil away, and eroded it to a different place and just devastated the Midwest. Remember the erosion in Providence Canyon in Georgia? It's going to continue. The Providence Canyon will get deeper and it'll get wider, and it all started due to poor farming practices. This area will never again be used for growing crops. It is lost forever to crops because this is just going to continue to erode and it's going to get deeper and wider. So what are some ways that soil can be conserved? Well, let's look at a few. You've got terracing, or making steps in the side of a mountain. This keeps water and soil from eroding down the mountain. As you can see here, it's just like creating stair steps. Not only does it slow down the water and soil erosion, but it also gives farmers a flat spot to plant more crops on a more level area. Now contour plowing is a little bit different in that you have a smaller slope. So contour plowing is more for a hill instead of a mountain. Where terracing is on a mountain, contour plowing is more for a hill. And what you're doing is you're following the contours of the hill, going around the hill. As the slope goes down, the water is slowed down in all of these furrows. And so when you're plowing on the contour, it slows down the water and keeps it from washing away and eroding the soil from that area. So contour plowing is for smaller slopes like hills, where terracing works better for mountains. All right, crop rotation, just like it sounds. So when you're planting different crops in the same soil every few years to preserve and replace the nutrients in the soil. So say I have a 20-acre farm and I want to be sure that I'm not depleting all of the nutrients in my soil. I might plant beans for 3 years, and then 3 years after that I might plant lettuces, and then the next 3 years I might plant carrots and radishes. And that way I'm not depleting the same nutrients from the soil every year. Actually, some plants put nutrients back in the soil. So crop rotation is simply planting different crops in the same soil year after year. Okay, so no-till farming is simply not plowing the soil. So leave the remains of last year's crop on the ground to protect the soil. So you can see they had corn here last year. See the corn stalks right here. And this is all the ground up corn stalks on the ground, and they left that on the ground. And they planted the seeds within all of those corn stalks. And what this did was protect the soil. The rain, the seeds were, the rain couldn't wash away the soil because it was protected by all of these old stalks. And if you notice, they're planting beans here this year, so they've actually done crop rotation as well. So they had corn last year, and they have beans this year. So no-till farming just means not plowing up the ground and exposing the topsoil to the water and the wind, and leaving last year's remains of last year's crop lying there to protect the soil. So planting trees as windbreaks is another way, especially out in the plains areas where you have these huge expanses of flat land, and the wind just comes whipping across those areas and picks up the soil. So if you go in and you plow the soil, it exposes the soil to the wind. So if you plant trees, like here's some smaller shrubs, some taller trees, and then some taller trees, but here is the crop here. And so as the wind comes blowing down the plains, it's diverted by these trees and keeps going up here instead of down here where the soil might be exposed. So it protects the crops and keeps the soil in place, keeps it from being blown away by the wind. So at the bottom, down here, you're going to summarize in your own words what you have learned today. So all of this should have been on page 44 in your DAB. You should have put your questions on the left side. You should have put your notes on the right side. And of course, you can stop the video at any time to go back to complete this.